Before we dive into the episode, make sure you hit subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening on. Also, follow me on X at The Dave Dynasty and subscribe on YouTube by looking up Nostalgic Dave Dynasty. You can also buy one of my shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com/The Dave Dynasty. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to 1 hour of the toughest, roughest wrestling you'll ever see.
That's right, Dick the Bruiser said it all.
The big question, have you got the endurance? Have you got the brains to get past the excellence of execution?
The reason why Axe and myself were put on this earth is to demolish people.
Bobby Heenan is a very good-looking sport coat you've got on.
Yeah, and I paid for mine. Mine isn't government issue.
Hello, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. And by golly, we're ready to go with another big week of championship wrestling.
Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining me. This is a special episode of Wrestling Nostalgia. And on this, I'm looking at some of the other tag team partners that teamed with Demolition Ax after he left the WWE. Now, it seems, I see on social media sometimes, people posting pictures of some of these wrestlers, and there's a couple that are no longer with us. But these handful of wrestlers posting these pictures and things, and often calling them, demolition ripoffs or fake demolition, or, demolition when you order them from Wish, all that ridiculous stuff. But the fact is, these guys were approved by Bill Eadie, Demolition Smash, and, Barry Darsow, usually gave him the okay too, right? When Smash left the WWE, he teamed with a couple of these guys as well. But Smash has never expressed any concern with these other guys that have teamed with Axe. But they were all approved by Bill Eadie, Demolition Ax. They teamed with him all over the world. And just because they did not appear on WWE TV doesn't mean that they still aren't a very interesting part of Demolition's history. I've always been fascinated by it, right? You'd see some of these guys pop up on posters back in the day of shows and independent shows in areas all over the place, or have their picture or a mention in some of the wrestling magazines, and it was always fascinating to me, right? Because it's not Axe's Smash, right? It's not what you saw on TV or on WrestleMania or whatever, but it's still Axe with a new partner, and I thought it was kind of cool that Demolition was in some form continuing on. Of course, I'm a big tag team wrestling fan. So it was always a cool thing to me, and I love Demolition. So I like the fact that Axe was still out there getting to do his thing with these new partners. And I hate when people knock it, because it's not guys just mimicking, right, and doing it on their own. This is people that were chosen and approved or whatever, and given guidance by Demolition Ax to team with him, and you'll hear all about that when I talk to these guys. And my guests on this show are Tom Kerr, better known to most of us as Milwaukee Mauler, but he teamed with Axe as Demolition Mauler. Phil Monahan, who was known as Demolition Nitro, and Camine Azzato, who was known as Demolition Blast. So we've got 3 separate interviews. These guys, they're not all together, 3 separate interviews. So this is a super packed episode. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be very interesting. I kind of ask all 3 of them kind of the same questions for the most part, so that you can really experience the involvement and the consistency of Demolition Ax and having these other partners and wanting these teams to represent Demolition in a positive light. So all right, so let's take a break, and then we'll kick off the interviews with our first one, Tom Kerr, otherwise known as Demolition Mauler.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop, Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
And welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. This time I'm being joined by Tom Kerr, a veteran wrestler who is better known to us as Milwaukee Mauler, and in this case, Demolition Mauler. Mauler, how are you?
I'm doing good, Dave. How are you?
I am doing good. Thank you for your time. Talk to me. Tell me about the first time that you met Demolition Ax.
Well, let's see. If my memory goes back, it would have been the fall of 1996. I was working a show. I was trained by T.C. Reynolds, the American Patriot, here in Pennsylvania. Well, we trained in New York, but anyway, he was more of a Western Pennsylvania guy. And he got me booked over in Youngstown, Ohio. And that was when, that was IWA from Preston Steele was his name. And he had a couple names on the card. I can't remember some of them, but one of them was Demolition Ax. And, well, it was pretty exciting because, be honest with you, when I was growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, actually it was more in the 80s when we got cable and we had Georgia Championship Wrestling. I was a huge Mass Superstar fan.
Yeah.
And as you know, Bill Eadie was Mass Superstar.
Yep.
But I had gone in the Marine Corps in the mid-80s and then got out, and I had been lost with wrestling. So I missed the whole Demolition run. And then I got back into wrestling in the early 90s after they were gone. So once I found out that was the Mass Superstar sitting there putting makeup on, I was like, holy smokes, this is crazy. But I went over and introduced myself, and he's from Western Pennsylvania, down in Brownsville, which is south of Pittsburgh. And so, just a real minor chat, real polite, and then left it at that. And it really wasn't until years later that I met him up in Michigan when Phil Monahan's CIW was running shows. So I think that was around 2002, 2003-ish when I ended up there.
Yeah, well, and how did it come about for you to do the Demolition Mauler, to do that gimmick?
Well, when I first went up to CIW, I had met Phil and his brother Nick, Chainsaw, and they were doing the Disciples of Destruction at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, these guys were big, they're strong, they could move in the ring, and they had like the face paint, and they had the vest and everything. Really didn't look like Demolition, but it resembled Demolition in a way, but in their own way. They wore like leather pants, and they had these tops made. Well, when Phil brought me up, he tried me out to see how I worked, and realized that I would work well with him up there. And he had been training with, his trainer. He'd been tagging with Sledge and Jay Bauer.
Yeah.
And is that his name, Bauer? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Anyway, they used to do the Disciples of Destruction. Well, with Phil and his brother being a tag team, he had said, it was suggested that I work with Jay as the Disciples of Destruction. So that was my first foray into putting the makeup on, and I used Phil's gear for a while till I got my own gear made, and then that went on for about close to a year. And then Nick had some other things going on in his life, so he left, and then I became Phil's partner. And we just called ourselves the War Machines, which was basically, a combination of wearing makeup and the spikes and leather. Not really doing a demolition thing at the time, but because he had a good relationship with Axe, he had tagged with him quite a few times and worked against him, and booked him on shows and stuff. So he had suggested, would I be interested in getting gear made to look like Demolition, and then, if any opportunity come up. I think right at around that time, the mid-2000s, Smash and Axe weren't really, I don't know what the deal was, but they really weren't doing things together. They were doing their own individual thing.
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, why not? I already had the vest made, and then I just ended up getting a helmet made and the rest of the gear. And so we got booked on a few shows as Disciples of Destruction. We didn't really go by Demolition. Then we went by Atomic Demolition for a little while, just to kind of keep the name separate. And, we never, I was always, I think you had Demolition Blast, and then there was Nitro, and then me, I had tried Bash, and then eventually I settled on just being Demolition Mauler for a while. And it went well, and then we just went back and forth with the War Machine gimmick, which was like a twist on, the Demolition gear and the Disciples of Destruction gear. We just tweaked it a little bit, and then opportunity came, I want to say 2004, 2005, maybe later. Phil brought Axe and Barbarian up to do a show, and Sledge and I worked against them. So I was like, oh man, dude, I'm not a football fan, but being from Western Pennsylvania, it'd be just like me playing catch with Terry Bradshaw or Ben Roethlisberger. Here's the guy I watched on TV, and I'm going to work him, And so that was fun. And, I just learned those two, they just taught me a lot of things, pulled me aside. I always asked them, what can I improve on and things like that. And they were very helpful in that. And so further went down the road that I ended up working another match versus Axe in another Michigan city, and it was a tag match. Adrian, I think that's what it was. And then, as the years went on, I'd see him from time to time, not too often. And I got a call from Phil one time, and he said, "Hey, I'm working with Bill in Indiana." He goes, "Barry's going to be up in Port Huron for Blue Water Championship Wrestling." He goes, "You want to work with him?" I'm like, "Yeah." So here we are the same night in two different cities, working with each member of the Demolition. And man, working with Barry and hanging out with him later and just learning a lot about the business, man. Oh, what a phenomenal experience is that. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And then later down the road, I had a 07, 08, the previous promoter I told you about, Preston Steele. He was good friends with Bill Eadie, and Bill, he had mentioned to Bill that, that I had worked with him up in Michigan, and Bill had remembered it, and he said, would you want him to work with you? And he says, yeah, that's fine. So I assumed he I did good enough that I was respectful to the gimmick and everything, and that my work rate was up to par for him to allow me to do that. So I always thought that was a good sign, and you know what? I never abused it by, calling myself a member of Demolition or anything like that. So, I always just said, hey, we're a comic. It's more of a tribute more than anything, and we just did our own thing. Yeah. Although Barry did get on me a few times with the style of makeup I did use. I kind of did use a lot of his style.
Well, the thing is, online, a lot of people, you hear a lot of people knock, right? Some of you guys that did the Demolition thing, and it's weird to me because it's not like your typical copycat kind of thing, because you guys were working with Bill and Barry. You had their blessing, right? You had their endorsement. Well,
I don't know. I mean, they didn't say anything. I don't know if we had their blessing or not, but we had their, at least respect in the locker room that it was okay. But I'm sure if we were making big bucks at it, I'm sure they would have said something.
Right. Well, I mean, but if Phil's teaming with Bill a lot, you went up, you've teamed with Bill, you went up, teamed with Barry. So obviously they didn't have an issue with it, right? They were okay with it at that time. So to me, it's completely different, right? It's a whole different realm.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I just feel that they felt that we were kind of respectful, that we weren't cocky or anything like that, and then we just, we wanted to respect the where it came from, because you know what, there's nothing new in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
Everybody borrows from everybody. I mean, how many? I probably know 7 doinks. So go figure.
Yep. Right. Yeah.
And then work with Matt Bourne.
Yeah. Yeah. So in all your times, different times teaming with Axe, teaming with Barry, did they ever specifically coach you at all, like the mannerisms or the moves, or tell you, hey, do this, or this is the Demolition type thing? Did they ever give you specific instructions on what to do?
No, I wouldn't say. You know what the hardest part about for me in working with name people, sometimes I don't feel I'm in their class. Like I'm still an indie wrestler working in big name, and I was trying to respect them because of their name value and their years of service that they've done for the business. And sometimes I kind of sold too much, if so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it wasn't them that actually told me that and brought it to my attention. It was Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express and the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Both pulled me aside one time, and they say, "Hey, man," he goes, they don't know, like my my regular professional job I was a postal worker for 35 years. They said they don't know Tom the postal worker. They think you're traveling the country just like we are. And he goes, when you're in the ring with us and you're wearing the Demolition gimmick, he goes, they think you're part of, wrestling history there, that kind of thing. So you got to work with us, you know what I mean? Like, yes, you sell for us, but we will sell for you too, And I thought that was a real eye-opening thing. But actually from Barry and Bill, no, I didn't get that. But I got good things point, because I always, after every match, I always asked, is there things that I did well? Is there things that I can improve on? Because in my business, it was, you either win or you learn. There was no such thing as losing. You either win or learning. And that's the way I adapted my my career to that.
Yeah, it's funny you would say, because when I asked Phil the same question, and he said the only thing he ever really got was Bill told him, "Hey, you got to stop that selling so much. We don't sell like that."
Yeah, that's me. I know, right? And even I had that thing with when I'd work with Phil also. Just me and him as a tag team. Phil just come in and he just laid him in. Powerful and everything like that. And I had my moments, but it was always like, don't oversell that much, and that was a hard adjustment in the beginning stages. And eventually, you kind of learn as you go.
Yeah.
And
he said Bill taught him how to work big, right? To work as a big
guy.
Yeah. And to work that power style.
And that was the first thing that I noticed about, I met Phil and his brother as up in Cleveland working for JT Lightning. And dude, I was just blown away. First of all, they're like 10 years younger than me, and they're just working like giant men, you know what I mean? And I remember coming back and saying, you should have saw these guys that were on the show with us,
Yeah.
And we instantly hit it off since then.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you mentioned, right, you teamed with Phil a lot. You did the Atomic Demolition thing, and Phil told us a story how Nikolai Volkov helped give you guys that name to set it apart a little bit. And one part I talked with Phil about, one thing that was kind of cool about what you guys did, you were managed by Henry Fuji, which was a guy that Phil said he was training that as, I think he said his grandson of, they played him off as the grandson of Miss Fruit. It was,
that's what Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it totally
and he looked the part.
Yeah, he did. And he totally added to the presentation. And it was such a cool part of it. And it was kind of set you guys apart. I've interacted with him a little bit over the years. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I remember that and everything else. And I've interacted with Henry online a few times, or whatever. I'm not sure what his shoot name. I'm not going to give it out. But anyway, he's a good guy, right? He's such a good guy, and that had to have been so much fun doing that. That atomic demolition thing with him and working at that time. Oh yeah. We took at one, a couple shows that stuck out in my mind with him was we took him out to Chicago. We worked some indie promotion out in the south side of Chicago, and it was funny. We walk in the locker room and we don't know any of those guys, but Phil knows the promoter who's like their head guy there, the head wrestler, and they were real nice and friendly and everything. And we were working him and his tag team partner in the main event. And but it was just like you would have swore we just walked out of the WWE the way they. That's what I'm like, dude. We're just indie guys like you, man. Except we just spent money on the outfits, Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and then the same thing happened. I don't know if did he tell you about the show we did at the Indiana State Fairgrounds.
No, he did not. What's up with that?
There was a loaded show we got booked on. Phil got us booked to work Barbarian and the Ming, and the show was loaded with it was like a show from 1986. There was only like me and Phil as indie guys, and we're doing a demolition gimmick, and then there was maybe two other guys that were indie guys, and everybody else was of name value on this show.
Yeah.
Midnight Express was there with Jimmy Cornette. Tony Atlas was there. Greg Valentine. So we're getting dressed, and we come out, and across the, there's a big. It's in the state fairgrounds in this big arena, and you see Sherry Martel coming towards us, and she's probably maybe 30, 40 yards away, so she can't. She just sees two guys come out in demolition gear, and she goes, "Oh, look, Bill and Barry are here." And then as she got closer, we walked towards her, and she's like, "Oh, you guys aren't Bill and Barry."
Yeah, he did get talking. I remember because I worked a little independent wrestling, mostly South Central Indiana. I worked kind of through the Midwest a little bit, but anyway, he did tell me about the notorious Bobby Rice shows and some of those.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's it.
Was that it? Was that the one?
Bobby
yeah,
Rice.
Yeah. So he did tell me about some of those.
That's the show.
Yeah. And Bobby Rice was all the talk. I'm originally from Columbus, Indiana, and Bobby ran a show there.
Okay.
And I hate to say anything because, Bobby ran some good shows.
No,
it had some great talent,
shows.
and it just
they were good shows.
Just did not draw.
I don't know where.
What? Yeah.
His sponsorship or something had to have paid for the talent, but why it didn't take off, I don't know. But I thought he did his very best in everything that he did, but I don't know why it just didn't take off.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's almost like the prototype of what a lot of independent shows do now, right? Where you have a lot of names and stuff, but it's now they have the tool of the internet to help promote. And back then,
you
did.
And then you could bring in guys just to sign autographs. They don't even have to work now.
Yeah. So I got no problem with Bobby Rice. I don't. I had no issues with whatever else, but it was just those shows got quite the reputation because they for whatever reason just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But whatever. So we talked about the legacy of Demolition. Right, this wild, weird story, all the way from the beginning, right? With Moondog Rex and all that, the original. Right. There's just right from the get-go. It's just this wild story almost. What does it mean to you? I know you said you were humble, you don't consider yourself, but just to have your part, however small you want to call it, just to be just a small part of that story. What does that mean to you in your career to have done that?
You know, I come from humble beginnings. You know, when I got into this business, all I wanted was one match. I didn't care less if I had a career.
Yeah.
But it was something I pursued and I wanted to do. And you know, I know a lot of indie guys that just go from, you know, indie to indie. And you know, I was blessed to be around guys that I used to watch on TV, you know, and respected. And, you know, I mean, you know, it really is a superstar. I tried to keep the, you know, I didn't try to worship them in that sense. You know, I was, you know, very respectful to them. And you know, you find out that they're just normal guys, you know. It's just, you know, they were in the right place at the right time. So I was very blessed. And then how many guys can actually say they worked with, worked against one of their wrestling heroes? You know what I mean? I liked a lot of the guys that I worked with, but, you know, and I always wanted Phil. I said, can you book him as Mass Superstar? And he said, well, he does that more in the South. He goes up in Michigan and Ohio, and that was the Demolition territory. I go, I understand. I said, but I would just kill to work him as Mass Superstar. You know?
Yeah.
But, you know, I can honestly say that, you know, I was blessed to work with one of my heroes in wrestling, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I was very proud of to put that gear on, although I rolled my eyes when he told me we were putting trunks on, because I'm not really built for the trunks. and that funny story, like the night before that Indiana State Fairground show, is that I had tried tanning beds, trying to get, because I knew I had more skin showing than I had normally shown in my gimmick as the Mauler. But I tried, but I just could not grasp a good tan. So he comes up and he says, hey, I got this tanning cream that we're going to put on. So here we are the night before, and we're like finger painting ourselves, you know, putting this stuff on. And you can, you know, as it's drying, you can see like where our fingers had gone on our, you know, like on my chest and that. And I'm like, oh, this is going to look crap. So he goes, well, we wait to dry. And then we like said, well, now what? And he goes, well, we might as well get some shut eye. So we sleep through the night, and we wake up the next morning and the sheets are all orange, you know, on both beds. It's just totally orange. It just like oozed off of us and rubbed off. We took a shower. It was like Psycho, you know.
Yeah.
You know, looked like blood running down into the thing, because it's all this orange stuff is on us. But hey, once we got to the show floor, Gary, we looked good, you know. Had a nice little tan so much, but it was fun. I mean, you know, I'll say this about Phil, man. He's been spot on, and a good friend and a good promoter. But he's gotten me to do some things that I really question. Really.
You know, it's
and I'd let him know about it too, and we laugh about it. You know.
That's the wrestling business, right?
So he could talk me into almost anything.
Yeah. So I just real quick, out of curiosity, right? You were known as Mauler. How did that transition over to Milwaukee Mauler? How did that transition over?
Well, I was the Milwaukee Mauler from the beginning.
Okay, gotcha. All right, that's what I was going to ask.
So I wasn't really like a real good. I was a brawler, and even my trainer knew that from the beginning. He goes, you're big, you're kind of slow, you got to work methodical. And I go, well, what are we going to do with the name? He goes, you know, I'm thinking of I'm not thinking of Dick the Bruiser, the other guy, from Michigan, or I mean from the Crusher. Yeah, Crusher. He goes, he was known as the man that made Milwaukee famous. He goes, what if you come out with Milwaukee's best beer and you start bragging about how you know the best wrestlers drink this Milwaukee's best, and Milwaukee's best isn't really known as really one of the top line beers, but and so it was part of the gimmick, you know. Yeah. And this is like early '96. So I would come out with this 6-pack, and you know, and I would get on the mic, and I would just start talking, and then I'd crush a beer on my head, and sometimes the 6-pack would end up in the finish and all that. And dude, that was the summer that Stone Cold was starting to take off. Oh yeah. So I kind of had to drop the beer because I was getting cheered, and I am playing a heel. So I kind of just dropped the beer and then just kept the name. And so I was I just kept the wrestler that made Milwaukee famous, and just kind of formed out of that. So
what's so wrapping it up? What's Mauler up to these days? Are you still involved in wrestling at all? Do you have an interest in it?
No, I haven't. 2011, I tore my knee. I tore my knee in 2000, got it fixed, and continued to wrestle. And then I was an ACL injury, but I was okay after that. 2011, I really put the kapots on it, and but I did do a couple battle royals. I did some matches. I did about maybe 5 matches in the next 6 years. But I was pretty much done, and I ended up getting a knee replacement after all that was done 2 years ago. But 2016, I'm kind of figuring like, well, I'm not going to be able to wrestle again, so what am I going to do? So what I've done was when I was younger, I used to draw, and I kind of did my own version of illustrations and caricatures, my own style. And I just started redeveloping all that, and I started with doing my wrestler friends, and then that gravitated in doing the consignments and stuff. So I started to call it Mauler art because I wanted to keep my name out there as, hey, this guy used to be a former professional wrestler, and I'll milk that till the day I die.
There you go.
And the Mauler art is taken off within, it started with people around the community. And then I've reached out to other people. I did a nice piece for Alundra Blaze, Medusa.
Yep.
And then I did some artwork for some other named wrestlers. And I don't know, if they wanted to make a T-shirt out of it, they could. I gave them my blessing. Nothing's ever materialized, but they gave me a shot, and anything that I can, maybe get a rub would help. But I also, in my personal life, I'm also a huge Oakland A's fan. So as going to an being an Oakland A's fan, I've had my own jersey made. It says the Mauler on it.
Uh-huh.
And like 12 years ago, I got caught on camera in Oakland, California, and they caught me in Cleveland, and they started talking about me. Ray Fosse and Glenn Kuiper were the TV announcers, and they had no idea what the Mauler was. And then so that night, after I got a bunch of texts from people in California that I making friends with,
yeah,
I sent them all a package out, all the announcers and the radio announcers. I sent them T-shirts and autographed pictures and described who I was. So they started looking for me at every game on the road, like Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, wherever I was at. And then I formed a friendship with some of them, and basically they looked for me, and so I've kind of rebranded myself as just putting myself out, hey, this guy's a former professional wrestler. He's an Oakland A's fan. He draws caricatures, and, it's just so I'm just trying to keep the dream alive, you know what I mean? Even though I can't do anything in the ring.
Yeah, well,
and I always put myself out there. My goal was to help all the indie wrestlers that were just struggling, because listen, there's not a lot of money in it, and you can make some money, but really, for the most part, there's not a lot of money in it. So
absolutely.
How I subsidized my income was I was selling a lot of gimmicks. I was putting gimmicks out on the table, whatever, anything wrestling, paraphernalia, whatever, photos, pictures, action figures, videos, magazines. That subsidized my income and helped me with, gas money and food money and being able to take a profit home a little bit. Well, so I figured, if I get back into it, if guys want to approach me, I can at least design a caricature of themselves. They can take it, go put it on a picture or put it on a T-shirt, and then, make some gimmick money because, making yourself available to the fans and let them take some, you become a personal favorite with them. Fans love that stuff,
So, I got to ask, will your A's fandom carry over to when they move to Vegas?
Well, there's a couple things about that. I'm not real thrilled about Las Vegas. I'm just not a big fan of the city itself.
Yep.
And what would probably nail me not being in is if they change the colors, because I'm a huge green and gold fan. That's what attracted me in the first place because of my high school. And I'm a huge green and gold. And But I do appreciate the history because I've learned about them being in Philadelphia and Kansas City prior to that. So, we'll see. We'll see.
It's weird to even think that about that.
I know.
I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a Cardinals fan. I always,
Okay.
Grew up as a Cardinals fan. They're in the in the Midwest, and kind of similar to me. I mean, when I was in elementary school, our mascot when I was in elementary school early on, right from the get-go, was a Cardinal. So that's just I loved baseball. So I thought, hey, they're Cardinals too. So, and then I fell in love with Ozzie Smith in the '80s, and it was done from there.
Nice.
So, but
I don't blame you.
Yeah. But we won't talk about the recent struggle. You would think that Milwaukee Mauler would be a Brewers fan.
You know what? I tried that for a while, but nah, I just couldn't do it. That was my kids' high school colors were blue and gold. So,
it's a good thing.
I thought about that, and I was just trying to figure out all those years. I'm like, geez, if I got tights, why didn't I go green and gold with white boots? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't like the Brewers because they're in the same division. But back in the back in the day, they had they had a few players. I was kind of players, Mauler and Robin Yount, some of those guys, and
and I go back even further with Gorman Thomas. Back in in the 80s, man.
Yeah. So,
those big guys like that.
But of course,
I loved baseball as a kid.
Yeah, back in the day, they were in the American League, so it was they weren't really a rival.
Right.
weren't a rival for the Cards then. So, but well, I always loved the A's back in the '80s too. I got caught up in all because I was a huge Ricky Henderson fan, and I got caught up in all that, and loved the Canseco, McGuire, and Carney Lansford, and all those guys.
Right.
Those teams.
Oh, great teams.
Yeah,
great teams.
Unreal. So.
Yeah, mine started at the end. It was weird because they had already started giving away the players from the 70s and trading them in that.
Yeah.
And I discovered that they were green and gold when I first started getting into baseball and collecting baseball cards and stuff. And then my aunt gave me all her son's stuff because he was done with baseball and he's in high school now and he didn't really care about it. And everybody on the cover was like Reggie Jackson, Vida Blue, Catfish Hunter.
Yep.
And I was just like, but I had to endure until Billy Martin show up with Ricky and Tony Armas and Dwayne Murphy and all them. And I had to endure a few years. But I stuck with them all these years, even through the bad years, Yeah,
it's been a struggle recently. It's that, I don't know, it's that weird, almost, major league type thing. It's almost you feel like the ownership was just trying to get them to move. It's been weird here lately.
It's a weird situation because it's been going on for 20 years.
Yeah,
and
it's
it just
wild
really hasn't came to head.
Yeah, because it's finally the fans drew their line, right? And they quit coming. They're like, hey, if you're not gonna,
they did.
If you're not gonna spend some money and give us something to watch, we won't attend. And it's been crazy.
You gotta look at it also. It's not the ownership. Obviously didn't want to open the pocketbooks, but also the ownership of the Coliseum, which is the city and the county.
Yeah.
They say they've tried, but I don't know. I don't know why. How can a community that's financially distressed like Oakland, California, lose 3 professional teams and all that tax revenue and the jobs? Makes no sense to me.
Nope. I absolutely agree. So. All right. Well, hey, Mauler, we're kind of getting off track here, but that's okay.
That's okay.
That's a different part, man. I can talk baseball for hours as well. But I appreciate you coming on, talking Demolition, and your part in that with me, and talking about interviewed. You already interviewed Phil, and got so we got both your guys. A little overlap in your guys' stories, right? Because you guys work together a lot, and it's fun. This is a whole side of Demolition. I'm a huge Demolition. I always love Demolition. And this is just a side, because, again, I just, something I wanted to, shine some light on. And I thought it was fun. And I'm glad you came on and talked to me. And I appreciate it. And maybe down the road we'll revisit and do, talk again and do something different. So, and if I ever start up that baseball podcast, you might be my first call. So.
Okay, sounds good. I'll talk some A's baseball.
There you go. All right.
This is Listen to Their Screams, a horror podcast that feels like you're chatting with friends. Hello, I am one of your friends, Dave. I am one of the co-hosts
of Listen to Their Screams with my friend Ike, and we want you to come and check us out. We are a fun-filled, positive horror movie podcast that does reviews, news, birthdays, anniversaries. We play games. We are a ton of fun every week for you, the horror fan out there. For all of our links to our social media and the podcast platforms, just check out our link tree. It is linktr.ee/listen2screams. That is listen, the number 2, and screams. Or look us up on your favorite social media platform and podcast provider. And welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. This time I'm being joined by Phil Monahan, veteran wrestler and promoter. Phil, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. Well, there's a lot we could talk about with you and your career, but we're going to focus just in on the demolition stuff. And that's kind of the focus of this. You've talked a lot, especially on social media and everything, about how important Demolition Ax has been to you in your career. So tell us about the first time you met Ax.
First time I met Ax was down in Indiana at a fair show. It was at a fairgrounds, I think, Shelbyville, Indiana it was. I'm going to say 1997. And he was probably one of the first name guys that I ever met in the business. Getting in, I was like in my first year there, and just met him and hit it off. We didn't talk too much, but everything was good.
Yeah. So who was running those shows at that time? Because I worked some shows at the Shelbyville Fairground. It was a few years later than that, maybe 3 or 4 years. But was it like Bouncer and Bo Jr. and those guys? Were they running those or?
No, this show was ran by a guy named Ed Jones.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think he ran around Shelbyville and Greenfield, Armory, and stuff like that. And Ed bring in a few different names during his time there. I know he bring in Terry Funk and a few guys.
Yeah, I can't remember. I want to say Bo. I don't know. Bo Jr. had a hand in those shows I ran that I worked in that area. At Shelbyville, he was. I don't know whether he was running the shows or just helping them book or what it was. But I worked some shows there in Shelbyville at that fairgrounds, and it was something.
yeah, I'm sure. I mean, back then when I was doing that, every show, there was a show I went to and Bo wasn't there, there was few and far between.
Yeah, well, that was kind of wrestling in Indiana at that time. And Bo was everywhere, and yeah. Me and Bo always hit it off, and he helped me get on a lot of shows and everything at that time. So let's get back to Ax. So when did Ax approach you about teaming with him and taking on a demolition gimmick? How did that come about?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. We were myself and Bounty Hunter were running CIW up in Michigan, and we were packing the crowds in pretty good. And I was like, well, let's why don't we try bringing in some names and see how that works. If we can even get more people in, which it did, which it worked really well. And Ax was the first guy, one of the first guys that we called to come up there and do it. And just, real smart. He took, really smart guy. And he kind of showed me a lot, taught me a lot, just in sitting in the locker room. And, at first we did like a tag team thing with him and me and Jay. We were wrestling as the Bounty Hunters biker gimmick. So it kind of went together. And then it went really well. It was really smooth. And I think Jay and I were talking afterwards. We're like, well, we all had talked about doing some more stuff down the road, and I can't remember who brought it up, but either way, Bill was really good with it, and we ran with it from there. And he kind of told us, some ideas for what we should wear and stuff, and it was on from there. So there was 3 of us there, myself and Jay and Bill doing the demolition gimmick.
Yeah, and of course, Bounty Hunter's no longer with us, but I think, did he work as Sledge?
Yes, he was Sledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then me, I didn't know what to go by. I remember sometimes I think back and some of the questions that I would call Bill up and just ask him, and I'd be just like, God, I must have been annoying as hell.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you because you were known, at least at that time, as Crash with a K.
Yeah.
Correct. Did you come up with that idea? Did Axe help you come up with that idea? How did that name come about?
I think I came up with that idea because he was on the Indies with another guy known as Blast before.
Right. Yeah.
And then I thought about that, but that was a no-go. And so, I decided maybe how about something that's a mix of Crush and Smash. We got Crash.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
which was cool because back then I had this mullet, a sweet mullet that resembled Brian Adams' mullet. Yes. And matter of fact, one of the memories that sticks out vividly, I was at this big autograph session. It was me and Bill. We were Demolition, and George the Animal Steel, Doink the Clown, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and Snuka come up and said, to Bill, hey, he looks like the other young brother, Crush. So that was really cool. I actually have a picture of that framed in my house. So that was sweet.
It's funny. So many people, they knock the stuff Bill did on the Indies, that Axe did on the Indies, right? Because they take a lot of things out of context, right? You see sometimes people pop up with the pictures of different guys that teamed with Axe and say, oh, look at this. Because I think they just assume that these guys were on the Indies just ripping off the Demolition gimmick, I guess, or I don't know what they think.
Right.
But but there were so many. Axe did this with lots of guys, I guess, probably based on where he was working at the time, as he traveled about. He had lots of guys that he did this gimmick with, that he was giving his blessing with it. So it wasn't a rip-off thing. This was like Axe supported.
Yes. Now, I think one of the things that might separate me a little bit from that is that Bill got me other gigs doing this. Like if he couldn't make a gig, he would call me sometimes. It wasn't a lot, but he would hook me up with some gigs, and I tagged with him in other areas too as Demolition. So that was pretty cool. And I'm fairly certain that I was probably the only one that went on any international tours doing the Demolition gimmick. Because when I went to Japan a couple times, I did it over there. And then another USO tour I did in Alaska. So I did Demolition in Korea, Guam, Hawaii, Alaska, in Japan.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. And like a lot of people can say, oh, you're fake Demolition, you're Demolition ripoff. Well, I had the blessing, and then down the road I had like new helmets made for all of us that Bill liked, and I also the last vest that he was wearing on the Indies was a vest that we had made.
Yeah.
I
know a lot of guys, there were a lot of copycat gimmicks in those days, and I mean, still are. Even, people do that a lot, but this, it always puzzled me because the Demolition thing was very different because Axe was part of it. I mean, he was always there, or had a hand in it in some way. Whether if he wasn't, like you said, if he was not technically there, he was given the blessing to do this. So I'm assuming is this all? Most of this is post the lawsuit where he got the rights of the name and stuff back, and or was it kind of in the process, or
this was during the process. So Bill was we were booked on a show in Toledo, and he actually had to cancel because of the end of the lawsuit or something that happened. I can't remember exactly what it was, but we ended up doing it instead, but we had to go by a different gimmick.
Yeah.
And then later on down the road, we were able to get back in it and do it. But it was just right then, there was just he was just playing it safe, I think. I'm not sure. I can't say 100%, but we had to take it off for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And so tell us, what was it like those first times when you were donning the face paint and the leather? What was that like for you? Because I mean, you were still relatively young, right? I mean, in the business, and
yeah,
I mean, that had to be a wild mix of excitement, and nerves, and everything. It was, yeah. I mean, try to explain that to us.
This is the best analogy that I can give it. Say you're a Chicago Bulls fan, and you get to go play on a team you get to go play for the Bulls, and you get to play with Michael Jordan. That is kind of where that's the best thing that I can relate that to, because growing up, I was a huge fan of them.
Yeah, right.
And I never thought that, coming out to that music and, just getting to put the paint on, and then it evolved over the years, but yeah, it was pretty freaking sweet.
Yeah. Did how much did Ax coach you a little bit with like mannerisms and moves and give you pointers or how did that work?
He did. Because I was young, but I was big and I was still bumping all over for everything. And he said, "You got to cut that out. We're doing this gimmick. We don't bump.
Yeah.
Or if we do, it's and he kind of, he taught me a lot in that aspect and how to work like a big man should work. So that was, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool, because I'm sure those lessons, I mean, even beyond the demolition thing, the rest of your career probably helped you, throughout to this day. I mean, that's pretty wild.
Yes.
So I'm sure you did, but have you ever met Smash? Have you ever talked to him or had a discussion with him about teaming with Ax? What did he have to say about the whole thing?
I don't know what Barry, I never really talked to him about it. I know that there was a show up in Port Huron, and this is a funny thing because me and Bill were actually booked somewhere. I think it was Pennsylvania, right? I can't remember exactly. And Barry was booked in Michigan. And Mauler, or Blast 2 or whatever he was going by, he ended up coming to Michigan to tag with Barry as Demolition, while I was somewhere else teaming with Bill.
Well, it works. I mean, that's part of
Yeah.
So did you ever use the Nitro name while teaming with that?
Yeah. After I'd started, using that name, I did use it.
Yeah. Because I've seen, obviously if you look at pictures of you doing the demolition thing, there's an evolution, right, to it, where you kind of grew with it, and you can kind of see where the the crash became the Nitro, right? I mean, there's a definite evolution of the character.
Yeah, when my hair started falling out.
Well, well, whatever works.
Yeah.
So obviously, as you've mentioned, you traveled a lot with Ax. What tell us some story. What's it like traveling with Bill and being on the road? What's he like?
Well, I mean, a lot of it wasn't so much riding together or anything. It was more of meeting at the venue and then, tagging and stuff.
Yeah.
That was how most of it. But, there's a lot of dinners afterwards. There's a lot of, calls and emails and different things. So, but just like from a business standpoint, I learned a ton, and he had some really good stories, and like I say, very knowledgeable.
Yeah, I've met Bill a few times, at conventions and different things, just brief bits, but it's wild for what he's accomplished in his career. I mean, not only the Ax, but the Mass Superstar stuff before that even. I mean, he's had two unbelievable gimmicks, and he still seems like just a pretty down to earth, humble guy. He's I mean, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yep. he's about as humble as you can get. Him and Barry both.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, yeah,
and
true. Yeah, right.
Barry, I believe he just moved to Michigan, so
Yeah.
I haven't been able to connect with him yet, but I'm sure we will.
Yeah. Yeah. So later, you mentioned Mauler, and later you teamed with Mauler quite a bit, and as the Atomic Demolition. So how did that come about? Was it just you guys working kind of the same areas, and you both had the demolition experience, and you thought, hey, we should do it together while we're here? I mean, how did that all develop?
It's funny. Nikolai Volkov is the one that came up with the name Atomic Demolition. So that was, we were at a fairground show, and me and Jay were wrestling against Nikolai, and I think it was my brother under a mask as a Russian assassin. And Nikolai said, "You guys should be, Atomic Demolition." So I was like, "Yeah, that's a good," because for a minute we were going by Demolition 2000 or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, that sounds even better. You're not really dating yourself, and you're, you can get some miles off that name."
Yeah.
So, me and Jay did that, and then Jay Jay and I started tagging with my brother more, doing my Nitro gig, and then Jay would team with Ax sometimes when he'd come up, and Mauler was coming in, and I talked to Mauler, so why don't you do this, and you and Jay can be the Disciples of Destruction or whatever, and do the demolition gimmick basically.
Yeah.
And they did that as a heel, and Jay kind of dropped off, and then me and Mauler, my brother kind of got out of the business, and me and Mauler were like, well, let's why don't we put our stuff to I got all this demolition gear, and it's not cheap, and you've got all this demolition gear, so why don't we start doing some stuff? And he's like, sure. And then I had a trainee, Jason Yang. I said, how cool would this be if he was wrestling as Henry Fuji?
Yeah.
And I can't remember who gave us the idea for that. But we call him the grandson of Mr. Fuji. And my brother also wrestled with me doing the demolition gimmick a few times.
Oh yeah? What name did he use?
Oh man, I don't remember what we called him. I really don't. I know he wrestled as Chainsaw for a while. So
yeah.
But him and I wrestled the Road Warriors as Demolition 2000.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you about Henry. Yeah, I was going to ask you about Henry, because that added a whole dimension to you guys that wasn't there in the other, right? I mean, he did a great job in that role, and just again, it added that Mr. Fuji was very integral in those early days of Demolition, and it added that whole dimension to the Atomic Demolition that wasn't there in a lot of the other teams. Yeah, we had kind of a story that he inherited the Demolition from, his grandfather or whatever. Yeah. So that was kind of cool, and people bought it. People bought it, and we got some miles off that for quite a while. Yeah, I mean, I remember you guys were just all over the place at that time. I was aware. These are. I mean, this is not internet days, so it's a lot of word of mouth and this and that. And like I said, I was working and stuff, so yeah, I knew of you guys and everything else. So, well, let's wind this down. Like I said, we're just focusing on the Demolition, so it's not going to go super long. But obviously, the legacy of Demolition is right. It's a wild, deep story, right? I mean, it's all the way from the beginning, right? With the origins of who developed the Demolition game with the name, right from the get go, and Smash being switched out, and it's so much stuff. And then the later lawsuit with Bill and that. So what does it mean to you? I mean, you've obviously developed your own niche and your own career outside of Demolition, and and we'll just touch on that here in a second. But what does it mean for you to just be a part of this Demolition story? I mean, it's very humbling. It was an honor to be able to do that. To wear that uniform, so to speak. I wouldn't be me without it. I can tell you that. I wouldn't be the wrestler that I became. That won the NWA national title and those kind of accolades. I never would have been able to get as far as I did without
I think, without that little part of Demolition during my career.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were a fan of Demolition prior to your career. In your mind, and you can be try to be objective here. Where does Demolition lie in the realms of the greatest tag teams of all time?
To me, number one.
Yeah,
number one.
Yeah,
I people are always going to argue about that. People are going to call them People are going to call them Road Warrior ripoffs, and I never really ever seen them as Road Warrior ripoffs.
I never did either. That was always weird to me because none of my friends, anybody that I watched wrestling with, we never saw it that way. They felt very distinctive. Obviously, yeah. I mean, good, but it's not like these were the only two people painting their face at that time.
Yeah,
I always viewed I like both the guys. No offense to them, but I always viewed the Powers of Pain a little more of a Road Warrior ripoff than I did Demolition. And
well, they did look like. I mean, they had the long black pants, and
it just
it was almost like two Road Warriors.
Yeah.
But those guys are great guys.
They are. Yeah, and both of those guys. I mean, those guys both had great careers outside of Powers of Pain before and after and everything. It's not that was a very small part of their careers.
Yeah, one of the fun fact there on a couple of these tours that I went on, one in Japan and Korea, and the other one in Alaska. I was booked on these tours to wrestle Barb. Him and I were the main events on these things.
Yeah.
So it was like Demolition and Powers of Pain, half or whatever for these main events. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was always a big Barbarian fan. Even, from his early NWA days when he just came in solo, and I love. Of course, he was in the movie Body Slam, which I love. Body Slam, I love that movie. And he was in there with T. Joe Khan, and so good. And I was always a fan of Barbarian. I mean, up through the him and Ming and everything else, and him and Haku or whatever.
Just a great guy too.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to know something funny? A little funny story here about doing the Demolition gimmick. And how we looked so much like him. Me and Mauler, especially, we were at this big wrestling convention down in Indianapolis, and it ended up kind of being a flop. But we were in our whole Demolition gear, and Jim Cornette seen us coming down towards him, and he starts yelling, "Bill, Barry, so good to see you guys." And we got closer. He's like, "Oh, hey, you're not." That was kind of funny. But we worked the Faces of Fear in that one, and that was just a ton of fun.
That wasn't a Bobby Rice convention, was it? One of his ordeals?
Yeah. Yes, it was.
I can imagine that. Yeah, I remember those. And I remember, he had aspirations, but they did not pan out.
No, he tried good. He tried,
He did.
That was the one where Cornette exploded in the locker room.
Yep.
And he threw a cup, and the cup hit Barb, and Barb was getting ready to go up and let Cornette have it, and Haku stopped him.
Bobby Rice ran some shows. I'm from, my hometown was Columbus, Indiana back then. That's where I was from.
Okay.
And he ran one of the high schools there. He ran some shows. I mean, they were solid shows, right? Great talents. They just didn't draw. I don't know. I don't know what he was doing. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention at that time, but
Barb was on those shows. Lex Luger was on them. Buff Bagwell.
Yeah, there were lots of guys, and it just wasn't. I don't know. It didn't draw, and I don't know whatever happened to Bobby Rice. I mean, I'm assuming he's still out there somewhere, but I know he hadn't had, to my knowledge, had anything to do with wrestling since that I know of.
He doesn't have anything anymore to do with it, but I've talked to him a few months ago. I talked to him.
Yeah,
he's on Facebook. So,
well, there you go. Yeah, it's kind of notorious. There's a slice of the times then to remember those shows in the Midwest. And what, they may not have drawn or whatever else, but I'll props to him because I thought they were pretty fun shows. I was at a couple of them here and there, and I'm sure they weren't good for him, but
financially, no.
Yeah. So all right, well let's plug a few things of yours, because you're promoting probably more than anything. That's what kind of your focus, right? Talk to us a little bit about CIW.
Oh, well, we're doing a lot of shows. We're running in Toledo area, kind of, using some of the Bruiser Bedlam Chris Carter's one of our commentators from that one. He's helping out. Terry Sullivan, he's down there doing commentary and helping out. Got Mike Elgin's one of our top guys. Malice. We're filling the seats down there. It's really coming together well. So, then we're back in Michigan. We've got shows going on. We're running roughly about twice a month. Way things are looking.
Yeah, and you have stuff on the net, stuff on YouTube.
Yep, Championship International Wrestling on the net, and CIWProWrestling.com, CIW Ringside on YouTube, where you can catch our television.
Yep, there you go. We'll check that out. And
we got both my sons are wrestling now for it. So yeah.
There you go. That's a good time, right?
Yeah, for breaking them in.
Yeah, so it's got to be a weird feeling as a father, right? I mean, as you're watching, because you have that whole added dimension of, man, hopefully something doesn't go wrong.
yeah. I want to get in there and show them how to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
It's good though.
Yeah, like I said, CIW definitely has has that Bruiser Bedlam flavor about it, which I very much enjoy. Right? I mean, your show, the intro is kind of modeled after the old Bruiser Bedlam show, and with Chris and Terry on there, definitely giving it that vibe, that feel, which is pretty cool, and adds a whole layer. Again, if anybody out there is not checking out has not watched Bruiser Bedlam, I mean, that's Bob Smith has said it a million times. It's one of the most unheralded TV shows in wrestling history. It is really, really solid stuff. And and I feel like you guys are kind of the spiritual successor to that and carrying on, and it's pretty cool. So like I said, even if you're not in the area, check them out on YouTube. You'll go subscribe. You can watch their shows on there. Their television show and their clips and everything on there. But if you're in that area, check out their calendar and go see a show. And
absolutely, we got 2 huge shows coming up. September 7th, WrestleRama in Waldron, and then September 8th, day after, Colossal Clash in Toledo with a steel cage match. In the main event, Michael Elgin versus Malice for the championship. This is like the 3rd or 4th time these guys went at it. The last time they had a 60-minute Iron Man match, and the crowd was with them the whole time. I had my reserves, but wow, they tore the house down, man. It was awesome. So this one's gonna take the cake right here.
Yeah, I mean that's a couple of big dudes right there that can go. And
yes.
So yeah, there are 2 guys that are kind of perfectly matched up there, and
yes,
works well. So very, very cool. So all right, well, thank you, Phil, for joining me. Like I said, we were just focusing on the Demolition. I know you and I could probably talk for hours about your career and Midwest wrestling and Dick the Bruiser and Bruiser Bedlam and everything else, but we were just focusing in primarily on the Demolition stuff for this. That's the purpose of this. So, but everybody go check
it for another time.
That's right. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have you back on, and we'll talk more. I love talking Midwest wrestling. So,
absolutely,
we'll hit that up sometime. But thank you for joining me, Phil. Thank you for talking about your place in Demolition history, and
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And everybody go check out CIW, follow them on social media, and subscribe to them on YouTube.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
All right, welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. This time I'm being joined by Camine Azzato, veteran wrestler who wrestled as Demolition Blast. Camine, how are you?
Well, thanks for having me on tonight, man. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I wanted to talk about your time, which I guess is still going on, of doing Demolition Blast, wrestling as Demolition Blast. I'm a huge Demolition fan, and I'm fascinated by all the other teamings that, Axe and to a lesser degree Smash did after the WWF run. So
Yes.
tell us about your first time meeting Demolition Ax.
I mean, I was wrestling on the independent circuit for the Savoldis. I was wrestling for Tommy D, Tom Rumsby in New Jersey. So I was pretty much all over the place, just probably not so new, but I was in a locker room for the Universal Wrestling Superstars, and I was one of the regulars. I was the Brooklyn Blaster. Went through a couple of identity changes in wrestling. I was the Annihilator at first, and then I changed it over to Blast, and then I became the Brooklyn Blaster. There was a Brooklyn Brawler, so that was kind of a little similarity, but I had the Gene Simmons look in that time. That was my inspiration with Kiss. Yeah. So I was, I didn't have my makeup down to a T, but I knew what I was trying to create. And because of a high school injury, I tried to commit suicide at 16 years old because of an overdose, getting hurt in football. I didn't really want wrestling. I always say wrestling chose me. So then in high school, the wrestling came to the school. Andre the Giant, Macho Man, they came to Wagner High School on Staten Island. And I was recovering not only from my leg injury, but also from a stent with suicide attempt. And then one of the promoters, Vince's promoter, came up to me just out of the clear blue. The football team was walking all the wrestlers to the ring. We were being like the valets, getting their gear, bringing it back to the locker room. Yeah. And then the guy came up to me and he said, "Hey, you ever thought about being a pro wrestler?" I wasn't in a good place then. I was still recovering from the injury as well as mentally, Yeah. So I didn't react like a kid that wanted to be a pro wrestler. I really wasn't a wrestling fan per se. Yeah. So I said, well, and lo and behold, the injury took about another 6 more months to heal, but then he connected me to Johnny Rodz, the unpredictable Johnny Rodz. Yeah. And before Johnny Rodz had his school in Gleason's gym in Brooklyn, he was out in East New York in a second story, like an apartment, not an apartment, but like a commercial building. Yeah. So that's where I started, and I started training there. But then when I started on the independent circuit around 1992, I believe it was, is when I had my first connection to Bill Eadie. Yeah. And he was in the locker room. It was unbelievable because he was one of the main guys with Jimmy Snuka, Kevin Sullivan, the Maniac. Kamala was one of the main guys, in that Universal Wrestling Superstars, Hercules Hernandez. And so Tommy D was using me often. And I was pretty over, I was getting over because I was a hometown kid. And even if we went to New Jersey to the Taj Mahal, I was pretty over, 6'6", 350 pounds. But I had that Demolition look. I kind of had a twist between Demolition and the Legion of Doom. Because I used my high school shoulder pads. I drilled 306 spikes in them and kind of made that my look, Yeah. Yeah. Then when Legion of Doom came out, they had these ginormous spikes, and Demolition had the vest with the little spikes, Yeah, yeah. So I kind of look like a melding pot of all of them, So, but Tommy D opens his mouth in the locker room and he tells Bill Axe, he says, "Man, you should do a new Demolition with Blast." And I was thinking, what an idiot this guy is. Like, why would you say this is the mass superstar you're talking to? Like this guy isn't, just who you see. This is like, one of the veterans. And Bill looks at me, but I guess from being in the locker room many times, I was taught, even by Dwayne Johnson's dad, Rocky Johnson, told me one time in a locker room, he said, "Kid, keep your mouth shut, your ears open." Yeah. So I kind of followed that. He said, "You have a lot to learn. You're green at the time." So I was doing that. I was very respectful, and I just wanted to do my part. And man, I heard from Bill's deep voice, and he goes, "Yeah, we can do that." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "What did he just say?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's try this." And man, I went home that night, and I tell my mother, "You're never going to believe I'm part of Demolition." She goes, "What are you on right now? Like, what are you taking?" And I said, "I'm not kidding, man." But yeah. That's where it began.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. But you were the first, right? You were the first.
I am the original Blast, man. I don't know. Yeah. I guess Axe went overseas, Bill went overseas and did a couple of things. And I think the Blast works so good, even in the presentation. You got Axe and Smash, you got Axe and Crush. but you got Axe and Blast. It was like AB. It was everything that just was good for, the promotion and for the name, man. I was so honored. But I was the original, and it's so funny when people go on Wikipedia, they're like, "You're not the original." Like, man, I was Blast before Blast was even part of Demolition. So.
Yeah. So obviously you said you were excited. Here you are, right? Still relatively young in the business, right? Doing your local thing, and to kind of be thrust into this, that had to be, just absolutely surreal. You just had to have, thought, this is this a rib? What's going on here?
Yeah, I thought it was a complete rib because, in the locker room, these guys are ribbing each other left and right. You just never know who's right, who's serious. So, and here's the thing that I was used to being around these guys that had these promising careers or just were coming out, because remember Iron Mike Sharp, right? So Iron Mike Sharp, when he opened his school in Brick, New Jersey, because of Tom Rumsby, I was the guy who used to drive all the way to Westchester, pick up Freddie Blassie, classy Freddie Blassie at his house, and drive him to Brick, New Jersey. So I lived in Brooklyn. I'd go over the bridges, or I'd go through, by Yankee Stadium and pick up Freddie, drive him to the event at Iron Mike's school, and then I drive him back home. So I was getting close in the industry with guys, and not for any special reason. I was just respectful. I was a big guy. So I think like even Freddie Blassie felt like he had protection, So I used to be a bouncer in the clubs in Manhattan. I had that kind of background, but I was very respectful, raised in a respectful family. So when Bill said that to me, man, I just was like, okay, this is definitely a rib. And then but how I knew it wasn't is when we started talking about doing promos. So I was always a single wrestler, and I really never had a shtick. I never really developed my character. Yeah. And so I'll never forget, Tommy D takes us to Florida, and we're doing all of these promos down in Florida at Universal Studios, even before WCW had that contract there. Yeah. So we were down there and we're doing this show, and Bill's cutting this amazing promo with wrestling these two guys. He's ripping them to shreds. I'm just standing there and it's like I feel like it's fake. I can't even believe I'm part. And then he goes, "Tell him, Blast." And I go, I look, the camera's on me, and I go, "Yeah, exactly what he said is what we're gonna do to you." And so I give it back to him. and I could see this look of disappointment on his face, like, what the hell is that? So after the cameras go off, he goes, "You know what? You suck." He goes like he goes, "But I'm gonna teach you." And I go, "Oh my God." So I got the wrestling through Johnny Rods, who was a mentor. I got the education part behind the scenes from Freddie Blassie. And now I get Bill Eadie, and those are the only 3 wrestling dolls that I own, beside myself. Yeah, because I had one in Japan. But it's so crazy that those 3 guys. But I couldn't even. When my mom came to the first wrestling match that I was partners with Axe, she was crying the whole time. She just couldn't even believe it. So yeah.
Well, I got to ask you on a side note though. You say you're from the Brooklyn, and you mentioned right Johnny Rods, Gleason's Gym. Where were you there through the hype, the Mike Tyson fever in Brooklyn?
Oh yeah. I was there through the Mike Tyson fever and all the stuff with Teddy Atlas and all those guys. Yeah. So that was pretty insane because I grew up right there. It literally was a mile and a half from Gleason's Gym. So, but I actually helped them move to Gleason's Gym. So it was me and a couple of I forgot so many of the guys' names, but even what's his name, Taz. Taz lived in Red Hook, so we trained with Johnny Rods. So it was all that era,
It's wild. I don't know how Tyson came up recently. I was talking to somebody, and I'm like, man, people don't understand. Tyson's this big personality now, but back then, that was destination viewing when he fought on like HBO or whatever at that time. It's like everybody, it's like the whole country tuned in. And it was, the bets weren't would he win, it was how quick will he knock him out.
Oh yeah. And one of the funniest things that I remember, because I used to go to a lot of the boxing events, I was friends with Iran Barkley, so I knew him through a mutual friend. But I remember the one thing with Billy Crystal. Did you ever see that interview? Billy Crystal pays this astronomical amount of money to sit in the third row at a
Yeah.
Tyson fight. And that's when he fought Leon Spinks. He says the fight started. The crowd screamed. He goes, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is standing in front of me. I can't see. I didn't see any of the fight. He said it was over before the bell. I mean, he says, I'm trying to look past this ginormous giant. He goes, and I paid I think he paid like 100,000 or 10,000. I don't know what the number was, but he says it in the interview. He says, all I heard was the screaming, and I didn't see one shot, and then it was over.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the hype, man. It was all over Brooklyn.
I
mean, he was a Customato kid, so it was all of that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
Yep.
So you being so early on with Axe, post WWE, were you around him when all the lawsuit was going on with WWE over the Demolition?
I was with him when the lawsuit. So I got with him right when he went through this. Now, I haven't watched any of or listened to any of the podcasts that he does with Smash.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was I was there right after they did what they did to him when he was in the hotel. I don't know if he tells the whole story that Smash and Crush walked right past him in the hallway. He thought he was being ribbed. They were all in the hotel and they walked past him like they didn't even know him. And he's like, guys, where are you going? And they're like, we can't talk to you, man. We're going to lose our jobs. That's when they let him go without even telling him. So I knew the whole thing. I knew about the royalties. One thing that Bill did was confide in me because we traveled. And so as we're traveling, I'm just like, I was like a son. Seriously, he's 20 years my senior.
Yeah.
So I was the kid in the locker room. I was the kid with all of these amazing names that are just Tito Santana's and, all of them. And to me, to get to be able to share that, listen to him, even we'd go to some hotels and he'd go to me. If I come down in the middle of the night and you're at the bar with the guys, he goes, consider yourself done. And I'm like, oh my God. So I go upstairs and I call my mom or I called my wife at the time. And, he really was a father figure. He was all business. He was all about the business, but he was all about being a husband, a father. It was just incredible what I was able to gather from him all those years. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people is the correct term, but there's maybe a generation of fans who don't realize Bill Eadie, right, as a mass superstar, had almost a whole career and was one of the biggest stars in the country prior to Demolition.
Yeah, and
so it's surreal. I mean, that's not even to mention that doing the mass suit. I mean, the
Mongolians,
the Mongolians, everything else he did, and it's so unreal to think of what this guy did for how long he did it. And it's almost like, he has this great career. All right, it's on the wind down. All right, let's change gimmicks and I'll have another great career. It's like he was just like kept going. You talked about how he coached you in promos and such. Was there a lot of coaching about like mannerisms? Demolition was known with the tongue, the timing, this and that. Did he coach you in just some of that finer details of being part of Demolition?
Yeah, I think what he didn't. So what he was gonna do was kind of shape me into wearing the Freddy mask with the leather, and all of that. But I think when we became the new Demolition, it was, and I don't know, I can't speak for him, but I think was it was more of a unique look for me having the shoulder pads, which was kind of Legion of Doomish kind of stuff, but had still the Demolition feel. So he just really helped me with my paint. So he was just that guy. Everything was about perfection. And then from him, he went from the paint with the eyeliner pencils, which I thought was horrendous. It's so hard to do that, to get it the way he did. Then I started to travel a lot with Kamala. I wrestled Kamala in like 20 something different countries. So with Kamala, he started showing me about the acrylic paint, and man, he was like an artist. So James was like, just do this. And then I became like this man. I still do it now. I don't wrestle anymore, but I do like community outreaches and stuff like that. And I'll put on my wrestling paint with my gear, and people will come up to me and they're like, who painted your face? Because I do the whole face. And they're like, who did that? And I'm like, me. And they're like, no way. It's in the lines. But that was because, so I had him. And then when James Harris taught me how to do it with the acrylic, man. I just loved it. And I like the acrylic better because you're not rubbing your skin to death, even though it's chemicals. You know, I got immune to it. So, but the paint comes off at the end of the match. Everybody sees your actual face, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So it's not smeared makeup. So it was kind of like finding my own. But he did teach me the mannerisms, after the interviews when I really got to do a promo. And he was even like, wow, you really got it now. And then even like the end, like always screaming our heads off, going to the ring, talking smack to everybody. Everybody loved Demolition. Everybody, they hated to love us. They loved to hate us. It was that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. And it did he help? Because I talked to Phil Monahan, right, who did Mauler with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and he talked about how Axe taught him how to work as a big guy, right? How to work strong, because he said Phil said, hey, I was out there, bumping for guys third my size, doing that, that kind of thing in the independents. And he said, Axe came in and said, nope, no more of that. You got to work strong.
He taught me that. He taught me that no one can whip you from one corner to the next corner. Nobody. I don't care who they are. It's either got to be a reverse or you got to stop it in its tracks. He did teach, and he was a technician. People didn't realize they look at the Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit's, they look at the smaller guys, the Bret Harts as the technicians, but the guy Bill's size, the technician part of him being a guy who can do a lot of small guy stuff, but really make big guys look even bigger. And he taught me, instead of throwing 5 quick punches, lean back and throw one huge haymaker. Even chops, even, and even instead of doing a cross chop like a Ric Flair, you do a down chop like Paul White, you do a big show kind of chop. The body and the motions of your body. I don't even know if he realizes how much he taught me. I think it was so second nature to him that, to me, I was always studying. I was always watching him. And what he didn't know is I would go to Blockbuster and get all the old Demolition stuff, So to me, it was like, oh my God, I got to go home and study. And that was my study, So, and I wasn't trying to be like Smash, which was crazy. If you watch those matches, you can tell the technical side of Bill Eadie. You could, the way he walks, the way he talks, the way he treats the referees, the way he backs a referee into a corner. People don't even know. If you really watch and study Bill, and even if you went back to the Masked Superstar or the Machines, it was consistency through the whole entire journey of his career, I believe. So,
yeah. Well, one of my goals was wanting to do this kind of a Demolition special, right? I'm a huge Demolition fan, and I believe, and I may be wrong, I don't know. There's a handful of guys, right, that team for kind of extended periods with Axe, and but I believe it's you, Phil, Tom Kerr, Mauler are about the only ones that are still with us, still alive. Right. And you guys were 3 of the most, the more prominent. And one thing I hate, and I see it all the time online, or maybe not all the time, that may be an example, but anyway, that people say, oh, it's a fake Demolition. That's fake. Look at him, robbing, ripping off Demolition. And I'm like, I don't think these people then, they're looking at it now without being there then. Right. And, and I was, I'm like, I've always been a wrestling fan, right? And I see this, right? Oh, there's Axe and Blast, right? Well, I didn't think anything of it because I thought, well, I don't care who it is. It's Axe is with him. That means Axe is giving his blessing. Right. Axe is part of this. So there's no fake or no copycat if Axe is a part of this, because no one's going to tell Axe to do this if Axe doesn't want to do this.
Right. And he'd never be backed into a corner to do anything. So
So I always hate when people see that in retrospect without knowing the context of these teams and understanding what independent wrestling was like then, because you didn't have 500 million promotions like you do now. You had a handful of quality independent promotions who were running these shows with lots of, former TV stars. And the fact that guys like you and Phil and Tom were teaming with Axe, there's nothing fake about that. It was very legit. These were big houses. Like you said, you traveled and Phil talked about, traveling all over the world with Axe. And it's extraordinary. And I really think I don't know what it is. In the modern filter, some reason, some people give it a bad a bad light. People are, again, they're looking at clips online and not getting the context of the thing. So I wanted to shed a little light on this, that, like you mentioned earlier, right? You didn't seek out to become Demolition Blast.
No.
It came up. I said, yeah, let's do this. And there wouldn't have been a Demolition Blast if Bill Eadie hadn't said, yeah, there's going to be a Demolition Blast.
No, and then even like the George Napolitanos, with all those magazines that were in newsstands all over the country, I'm in almost all of them, which is crazy. On my, I was telling you, I just had to find it. It was the July 1993 issue. Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, and Kerry Von Erich are on the cover, but it's the Wrestling All Stars. And you got Hogan on the cover, and then you go inside and it tells you the whole history of Demolition. How even Bill Eadie started with the Mongolians, the Masked Superstar, like all the way through it. And as he's going through, I'm on the last page with him, and Bill's telling the interview with George Napolitano and saying, and then I brought on Blast. To me, having my picture in there with him, I'm like, this alone to me is like, it's like cherished gold. Because I'm in so many magazines with him, even with Jake the Snake, like me and Bill are against Jake the Snake and Hercules Hernandez with Chuck Wepner as the special guest referee. It's like, okay, and when Chuck hit me, I thought I was in the 15th round with him and Ali because he almost killed me.
I bet.
It's horrible. That was in Bayonne, New Jersey. So I mean, there was so many moments. And that name, I went to India. I wrestled Mauler in front of 98,000 people. 98,000, bigger than any WrestleMania. Crazy. So just to be in those, and it was because of the name, it was the brand that I carried. So and even for that one reason is why I turned down the contract with WWF, because I couldn't burn this guy who gave me an opportunity. So, and Freddie opened up that door. Freddie Blassie opened up an opportunity for me to get with Vince, Sergeant Slaughter, because he was the booking agent at the time. And I just couldn't do what they asked me. And one of the things they asked me to do was to never speak to Bill again. I'm like, are you out of your mind? Like, I'm a Brooklyn kid. You don't even know how I was raised. It's like, you don't burn the people who give you the greatest opportunities. And it's just a whole bunch of craziness that I went through. So but
and obviously in recent times, right, Axe and Smash are together doing appearances and lots of stuff and everything else. I'm assuming that probably at some point, right, you and Smash have crossed paths, and that
I have never. And you don't want to know something? I'm going to tell you this, Phil. One thing that and again, I was there in the dark times, right? I was there when he was on the phone calls with his wife, Bill. Just going through this whole turmoil, Then he would go back to Atlanta. Then he'd go teach because he was a 5th grade teacher, So he's going, he's balancing that. He's balancing his family. He's balancing the lawsuit. He's so mad because of what Smash and Crush. And I'm all about forgiveness, especially now. Like, I'm a minister, so to me, I understand forgiveness. And when him and Barry got back together, people were calling me, man, can you come and do these Comic-Cons? Can you do these? And I absolutely will never do them. And the reason why is I want to respect that. I don't ever want Bill to ever feel not like himself because I'm in a room. You know what I mean? I just can't do that. To me, bro, run that course. This is you. You guys built Demolition, Bill, of course. But I knew to step back, and I have there's not an ounce of anything in me that has regret, has any kind of double thought process. Like, should I go do it? I mean, I could probably bank a couple of thousand, signing autographs, taking pictures. That's not my life, So, but I love him. I always see Bill as a father figure. Always see him as a mentor. Love him to death, and always, But I know how to keep distance because I don't ever want. It's got to be hard for Barry as well for the years that they were separated. So to me, it's like, hey, you gotta go do you. I'm doing me, and I'm good, man, 100%.
Yeah, and obviously you could tell in the way you talk and the things you've said, right? But obviously the legacy of Demolition, right? It's this wild story. It's a deep story. I mean, all the way back. I mean, right from the get go, right? I mean, when it's it's Bill and Randy Colley, and they're just like right from the the initial point. There's some controversy or what? Not controversy. You know what I mean? There's some issues, So it's like the whole time there's all this going on. But what does it mean to you to just be a part of that story, no matter how how small you might think it is or how whatever, just to be part of that history of demolition with Bill? What's that mean to you?
I've never taken it for granted. The name, the brand, the person behind, not even Barry, not even none of them. I'm talking about Bill Eadie. To be in that conversation, you can't even. I'm humbled every single day. Can't even tell you how grateful I am. And it's a story I could tell my grandchildren. I still do things, when it comes to outreach programs, because I'm, go into areas that have gangs and drugs and kids, adults that are hooked on heroin and stuff. So that's my main goal. But I do use my gimmick as a platform to draw them. And in doing so, I never take a day for granted. To me, it's like, this is what was afforded me for whatever reason. And it never had to be, but it was his choice to do that. Yeah. And I never take that for granted. So to me, I can't even put a word to it. It's like nostalgia. It's like when you belong to a part of a nostalgic thing that's going to go on I'm going to be gone one day, but wrestling is going to go on till the world ends, probably.
Yeah.
And to me, when people look back and they talk about the greatest tag teams, I wasn't one of them, but because of the name Demolition, I know that I'm not foolish. Because of the name that I carried, or part of the association with Bill Eadie, I was given opportunities to represent 9 organizations as either a world heavyweight champion, a TV champion, or a tag team champion. And I know I'm not floating my boat. I know that all happened because I carried an association to Bill Eadie. That's it. So if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be raising the belt over my head as even a single competition wrestling champion. I just know it's because I carried a brand that was well respected and carried a lot of weight. And when you're part of that brand, boy, you did everything right because you didn't want to bring shame to Bill Eadie. So that was it.
Yeah. And obviously, when most people remember Demolition. They remember Axe and Smash. But so in your mind, maybe granted, you're a little biased, but where does Demolition rank in the realms of greatest tag teams of all time?
In the realms of greatest, that's hilarious. I love that question. I've never been asked that. You've just asked me a question I've never been given before. And if you're in listen, I think I don't think there was maybe the Legion of Doom or the Powers of Pain. When the music hit, something happened in your body with adrenaline.
Yeah.
So those 3 teams were very like bikerish. These guys are going to do anything to win, between, Hawk and Hannibal, Warlord, Barbarian, or the Demolition team. But I think the Demolition was unique in itself. The song, it was like you were taunted from the beginning, you know what I mean? When Jimmy Hart wrote that song or whatever, so to me, I just think for what it's worth, because the Hart Foundation too, it's the same thing. You knew what you were going to get. And I think, but I think the greatest from being a heel, but getting treated like a baby face while you're cheating. So to me, there was no greater tag team that I could even wanted to ever be a part of than Demolition. So if I would say that, but I mean, I've watched so many tag teams in my life, I mean, when you went back to Pedro Morales and Tony Gurria, if you think about wrestling nostalgia in that sense, you had these 2 totally different guys that was like a dance when they tag team together, So
well, I'm a huge Demolition fan, but again, I don't really, sometimes the greatest or lists or whatever are weird to me because I go through phases, right? I go through moods. It's like if I want to see a brawl, I'll watch X guy. If I want to watch something technical, and so I go through phases of who's my current guy that I'm watching quite a bit or whatever. But you did bring up the music, and I don't think I ever waver. Best original song ever for a wrestler is the Demolition theme. Not a guy using a popular song or an already existing song. That song, perfect. Just encompass that team to a T. With Rick Derringer, everything, the lyrics, everything was just spot on.
Yes, spot on.
Yeah. And so you touched on it a little bit, right? You do outreach, you're a minister, whatever else. So what all is Blast up to these days?
Well, I'm pastoring a church, but I'm an outreach guy. So meaning like people hear the word church, they think it's very religious. I'm all about relationship. I've always been about relationships. So I like to leave the four walls of the church, get to the communities that are really hurting, whether it's gang related, drug related. I go down to Philadelphia, to Kensington, where they filmed Rocky, and people are walking around like zombies. So I grab teams of people who love people, but not just to go and pray for them, but to get them into a rehabilitation and get them back into society. So to me, that's my thrust. It's about saving souls. I wear shirts that say Wrestling for Souls. So people, my organization is called Hitting the Pavement because it's about hitting the street. And when I go to the streets, man, I just really want to meet people where they are, but give them the option to, man, say, you can have a turnaround today. You can really turn your life around. They don't believe it. 4 days of detox scares them, no matter what they're hooked on. But if they give us the opportunity, we can get them settled into a rehabilitation program and get their faith strong. Without their faith, they're going to fall right back into that same trap again. So I work with NYPD. I work with the Philadelphia Police Department. I work with different organizations, churches all over the country, because you need the local church. If they really are the church and they're not out there condemning people, pointing finger at people, the church needs to return to what they used to do and help people, love them, disciple them, get them strong, get them back on track, and let them go be a positive part of society. And if you look in wrestling, man, I mean, it's everything that now the Undertaker is doing. You know, it's everything Hulk Hogan's given his life. He's been baptized. So this is the Shawn Michaels thing. Ted DiBiase's been doing this forever. This is old to them. This is like you're preaching to the choir. These are the guys who were in the locker rooms trying to get Chris Benoit before all of that, horrific stuff happened. So these are the guys who are in there ministering. Because let me tell you something, the wrestling world might look the way you think it is, but I used to travel with the Iron Sheik and all these other guys, and it is a dark place, man. When the lights are off and you leave that arena and all the fans disappear, bro, most of these guys are in a very dark place. You hear the stories. Talk to Jake the Snake. He'll tell you all, the heroin overdoses and whatever these guys go through. I've been there, done that. Even in wrestling, I tried to take my life 2 more times. People don't know these things. They're like, what are you talking about? You always were happy. You were always success. Success is what I want you to believe is success is. But at the end of the day, I was broken. I was a mess. I had no value to my life. The only thing I really was holding on to, and God is my witness, was that name Demolition. At the end of the day, that was the craziest thing, is like, man, I have no excuse. But when you're dark inside and you're going through a lot of pain, you can't explain to somebody unless it's somebody like me now who's been there, done that, and understands there is hope and there is a future. So to me, that's what I do, so love it.
And just not to be sidetracked, you said the key word, right? Whether you're religious, not religious, whatever you do in life, whatever else, man, the key word's love, right? I mean, everybody can go out and just be kind, be compassionate. And you never know how just one moment of kindness or one moment of love, attention, how it could completely change someone's day. And it's, if everybody's trying to be good, then things are going to be better. And so, just, I don't know, I guess that's a little moral for the day. Just, just be nice. Just be nice.
It is, man.
Yeah,
we're supposed to love one another, so and
it's not hard.
No, it ain't.
It's but so you're out there doing a lot. Is there a way for fans? What's the best way for fans to follow you, to see what you're up to, some of these appearances, some of these outreaches, or if maybe they've got something they want to reach out to you, maybe they need help. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, I have a website. It's called Hitting the Pavement. So HITTINGTHE, hitting the, and then pavement, like the street, PAVEMENT.com. Or if you like the phrase I just said, Wrestling for Souls. So if you go to wrestlingforSouls.com, it'll retrack you to Hitting the Pavement. I have the email there. You could connect with me. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. You can go to, Camine Azzato, my real name. You can go to Hitting the Pavement on TikTok. I do TikTok videos, inspirational videos. I'll minister on there. So just a lot of good stuff. And I have a lot of good matches. Me, Tommy Dreamer. I got me and Kamala. I got Tito Santana, and these are a lot of the independent stuff that I was able to get through the years. And I just put them onto videos and put them up on TikTok so people could actually see them. You could see where I was green. I wish I could find the one. I wish I could find one video, and that's with Bam Bam Bigelow. If anybody out there has that, he lit me up. I chopped him one day, and I did not know how to chop. I left fingerprints on him. He grabbed me by the ears, spun me into the corner, and he down chopped me 25 times in a row. He opened my chest up so bad that his handprint was bleeding on my chest. The pores, the blood was cut. So we get in the locker room, and I think this guy's going to kill me. I'm green. And he goes, kid, don't do anything you don't know how to do. So then about a year later, we're matched up again. And I throw him into the corner, and I put his hand over the top rope. And he looks at me sideways, and I lay a chop in, and he smiles at me. We got in the locker room. He goes, "Boy, somebody learned." I said, "You better believe I learned."
Hard not to learn with 25 of them, right? I mean,
bro, listen, my pores, it was coming through the pores of my skin. The blood was I was like, "What is just going on here?" So, yep.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Not to that. I wrestled a little bit in the early 2000s. Late 90s, early 2000s in the Midwest, right? I'm from Indiana originally.
Right. Oh, my wife's from Indiana. Yeah.
There you go. Well, there's a couple guys that I, worked with a lot. Bobo Brazil Jr. and the former Calypso Jim and Diceman Rodney Vegas, right? I worked a lot of shows with those guys. And every time you work those guys and they put you that quarter, you're like, oh, they're about to cave my chest in.
Yeah. And how much we love it, don't we?
I do, man. I do. I wouldn't give it up. I'd take one now just to have that feeling again.
I know. It is amazing though. Absolutely.
It is. Well, Carmine, thank you for your time. Thank you for whatever. Remember your memories of Demolition Ax. And
thank you.
Like I said, I wanted to shed a little light. This is just a portion of the Demolition history that was always fun to me to look at, to know. Kept the Demolition name alive, the team alive. Bill had a great career at post WWE because of this. So I wanted to get you on, and like I said, talk to Phil, talk to Tom. Just wanted to talk about these guys that get to experience this with Bill, and it's just a fun aspect to look at for me.
Absolutely.
And, because again, back in those days, I mean, like you said, man, all over the magazines where, that Demolition was still out there doing their thing with new partners for Ax. And it was just a cool thing. Yep. So, but I appreciate your time and talking to me about this, and,
right.
Good luck in everything you do. And, maybe in the future, we'll revisit, do a part 2 and talk about something else.
Yeah, let's do it, man. I'm open. You just reach out to me, but I'll shoot you my number on the inbox, and we'll stay connected, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm really excited.
The following podcast has been paid for by Perched on the Top Rope.
What's going on, everybody? I'm former dirt sheet writer from Sportskeeda, Ringside News, The Sportster, The Richest, and Daily DDT. I am Lee Walker. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a podcast named Perched on the Top Rope. We are on Chartable's Top 250, and we have several interviews with the names of Booker T, Kevin Nash, the Young Bucks, and all sorts of current superstars from AEW, NWA, MLW, legends from WCW, ECW, and over 30 WWE Hall of Famers. I hope you come and check us out. We are everywhere and everywhere podcasts can be found. It's Perched on the Top Rope. And if you're not in the mood to listen to those interviews, you can go to youtube.com @Perched on the Top Rope and watch those interviews also. Fans, remember, spoiler free's the way to be. I'm out.
All right. Well, thank you to all 3 of my guests for doing these interviews. Again, I hope you found it fun. and interesting. I'm very fascinated by this part of the timeline and history of Demolition. So it was very cool to talk to these three guys who got to team with Demolition Ax. Everybody make sure you follow me on X. I'm at the Dave Dynasty. That's the best way to keep track of everything I'm doing, all the shows releases, the schedules, any announcements of guests and so forth, and plus all the historical posts, newspaper articles, pictures, all those types of things that I post. X is kind of the best way to follow me and keep up on all that. Also, make sure you go check out all the WrestleCopia network of podcasts. They're all fun shows, great hosts. They shine a light on wrestling history. You hear me say it every episode, but it is truly true. Truly true. It's a little redundant, but you know what I mean. So go look them up on your favorite podcast platform, or you can go to WrestleCopia.com to check them out. You can also check out my friends at the Ultimate Classic Wrestling Library. They are located at classicwrestling.net, or you can download the Ultimate Classic Wrestling app on all of your devices. Now, coming next Sunday, from when this is released, September 29th, will be the AWA Deep Dive, focusing on September of 1988. So that's coming up next Sunday. But on this coming Wednesday, the regular episode after this release, I will have guest Baron von Raschke on the show. And this is his second ever podcast appearance. It was so much fun, such an honor. I was totally just, starstruck by getting to interview the Baron, and it did not disappoint in any way. I talked to Baron. We focused on his years at Indianapolis for the WWA. He had such a vast career, so many different places, and you know me, I'm a WWA guy. So if I'm going to get Baron for an hour or so of his time, rather than just hit little bits here and there of all of his stuff, I'm focusing in on WWA and asking several questions about that. And plus, we discuss his new documentary, The Claw, which is available on Amazon Prime. Like I said, the Baron, he was in classic form, and he was entertaining, hilarious, just everything you want Baron von Raschke to be. So check that out coming Wednesday. Thank you all for your listen, your support, all your follows, and your interactions. You make this fun, enjoyable, and worthwhile, and I love the feedback, so keep on giving it. So make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you use so that you never miss an episode. Like I've told you in recent times, we're going to have from the year, at least the rest of 2024, we're going to 2 episodes a week. That's why this episode's out on a Sunday. We'll have our regular episodes on Wednesday, but each Sunday there will also be I don't know if you can call them bonus at this point, but it's just the rest of the year there's going to be 2 a week because I've got so many topics, so many interviews, so many deep dives, so many things I want to hone in on that, you know what, I'm not going to sit on these interviews and hold them for months waiting to get them out. We're going to keep this thing rolling, and at least for the rest of 2024, I'm cleaning out the stockpile, and we're doing 2 episodes a week. Lots of fun stuff, lots of great interviews. So make sure you subscribe so that you do not miss any of them. But until Wednesday, which will be our next episode with guest Baron von Raschke, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and always keep on growing.
Fans, we brought you All-Star Championship Wrestling. This is Sam Maneker thanking you for being with us and saying until next time, so long everyone.